Today we're going to take a look at awkward silences and we'll learn 11 things that will help our conversations flow better. Let us look at what happens when this conversation dies out.
Meets your expectations.
Yeah. So that's like because there was a time where I was found.
Do you live in Gothenburg otherwise, or do you?
Oh, I like that. Do you live in Gothenburg? That's such a great. So whenever you're in awkward silence, ask really simple questions like these because they get the conversation going. And if you try to come up with something really smart to say, you're probably just going to end up in your head anyway. So what I would have done here would be to use a location-occasion statement. I make a very simple statement about what's going on around me. Have you tried these tacos? I can't get enough of these tomatoes. They're so sweet. Or I like how they furnish this place. Anything that is a very simple statement. It might seem boring and obvious to say, but it's not because it gives the other person, something else to build on. So when you make conversation, think of it like you giving building blocks for the other person to pitch in on. And when the other person gives you a building block, you can ask something about that and go deeper and ask, oh, so how does that work? Or what was that like?
But because you have the credits, you can do it here or your country.
Okay, it's nice.
Yeah. So, what are you studying?
So here what the person in green could have done would be to dig deeper and ask more questions. Okay, so how does that work? If I do this and this, would that still work for me? Asking sincere questions and really being genuinely curious about the topic helps you get past the awkward silence. So if I were him, I would have really focused on what the guy in red would have said and trying to come up with questions and really understand the topic that you're talking about. Like if you're going through a really important plan and you have to understand every single piece of it, so you have to really focus, that's the mindset you want to be in. Also, the guy in green could have elaborated more. I think the case here is that he doesn't want to be boring, but because of that, the conversation does end up boring in a sense.
So, what are you studying?
Music.
So instead of just saying music, he probably didn't want to elaborate more because he felt like, oh, who cares? But instead, if he would have said, so I'm a musician, I studied at this and this place, and my dream is to one day play country music in the US, or something, whatever. The other person would have much more to build upon, and he would be like, oh, interesting, how come the US? How come country music? What type of music do you make? So there's so many things that you can build on, or the other person can build on, if you help them by giving them the building blocks, by sharing more with them.
Yeah, would be nice. Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
I heard that Tommy's Mexican here, right?
Yeah.
That's a really good one that she used to break the awkward silence because they're gonna eat Mexican food and it makes sense to mention that someone is Mexican. When there's an awkward silence like this, it makes sense to ask a very simple question. So, how do you know people here? What are we having? Or can I help you with the food?
Do you live in Gothenburg otherwise, or do you?
Yeah, I do. So I just live on the other side of Slottsskogen.
Okay, the opposite side from here.
Yeah, opposite side.
Really near somewhere.
Yeah, just beneath Masthugget.
I think that these two women are making conversation now just because it would be more awkward to not say anything. And the reason is that they're not emotionally engaged in the conversation. And what you can do to be more emotionally engaged is to switch over to a more personal topic. So here they are talking about where they live, and it's all very factual. It could come from Wikipedia. If they instead ask something like, so how do you feel about living in Gothenburg? Do you think you will stay here for the rest of your life, or do you have somewhere else you want to move? If you start asking people about their future plans, their brain will shine up and they will have all this activity because suddenly it's exciting. They get to talk about themselves. So ask personal questions like that. And a personal question does not mean what's your medical history. It just means what's your relationship to the topic.
You cannot say Europe and mean like both.
Everything, yeah. Oh, European people are so...
Exactly. Yeah, it's so different.
Yeah. Oh, it's hard.
Same way it comes to like agriculture.
culture and
Do you want water?
yes. So a lot of my friends are foreigners and like know a lot about.
I'm drinking wine.
Yeah. So I'm reacting the way I do because I know how hard this is, and especially when you know that you're being filmed, and they probably put so much pressure on themselves, but they're doing great. And that's the other thing, when you end up in an awkward silence, you probably blame yourself and you probably feel like the other person is waiting for you to say something. That's usually not the case. Usually the other person is blaming themselves too. So it's not just your responsibility to get the conversation going. And knowing this can take some pressure off.
You came along, you're like, oh, hello! And all the local people like, what is this? But you're from Brazil. Yes.
Ah, nice. Okay, so this never turned into an awkward silence. It was just a natural lull in the conversation. The topic naturally died out. And she asked, so you are from Brazil? That's a very simple statement. And that is so clever. Here, I think that the woman to the right, she may have, but probably she didn't come up with this on the spot. Maybe she had this in the back of her head, some things that she picked up when she talked to people. So maybe you talk to the man in blue to the left, and he mentions that he went to Bali. Or the woman there mentions that she works as a developer. So the next time there's a silence, you can just say, by the way, you went to Bali. Or, by the way, you're a developer. What's that like? So that's another building block. You just give to the other person so they can build on the conversation like that.
But then you tried at least.
I tried more than one time, but no, they don't catch me. No, not my thing.
How long have you been here?
So here a tip when you're talking more than one person and there's an awkward silence is to repeat the exact same question but to the other person who's not engaged in the conversation. So if you ask them, how long have you been here? And they respond, and then there's a lull, and then you ask the other person, so what about you? How long have you been here? Really, really good, because then you engage everyone and you become sort of the leader of the group. What I like to do is to see silences as an opportunity to move the conversation into something I'm more interested in. So let's say that you're a huge Marvel fan and you get a feeling that the person you're talking to might also be interested in Marvel movies. Maybe they're a little bit nerdy just like you are, or whatever. You just get the vibe. So when there's a silence, you can say, by the way, have you seen the latest this and this Marvel movie? You wouldn't be able to do that in the middle of a conversation, but as soon as there's like 1, 2, 3 seconds of silence, it gives you the right to move to a different topic, and that's when you can ask something related to what you are interested in. Everyone who signed up for this is probably extroverted and socially savvy, because otherwise they wouldn't have signed up for something like this, and still they end up in awkward silences, so it happens to all of us. If you're serious about improving your social life, you can join our free training on the link below. You'll answer some questions about your social life, and in return you get advice for your personal situation and goals. So just click below to get started.